At the outset, I would like to thank the organizers, especially Dr. Sunil Pandya, for giving me this opportunity to be with you all today to discuss the new guidelines on CPR in pregnancy. And I bring you greetings from the place I work, Danan Medical College and Hospital at Ludhiana, up north, up from India. Why is there a need to discuss these guidelines, especially in a forum like obstetrics, is because we all understand that there are two lives at stake, and despite parturients being young and healthy patients, their reported survival rates are poorer, with one of the case series reporting a survival rate of less than 6.9%. And the Indian scenario is appalling. And when I write appalling is because when I was preparing for this talk, we had a couple of maternal deaths in our hospital, which I felt was simply because there was a non-adherence or a poor compliance of the provider by not updating himself or herself to the newer guidelines and not updating the skills. So that is why we need to know what is happening new in these particular areas. And as an obstetric anesthesiologist, not only do we need to know what are the new guidelines, but we also need to know how we really need to adapt ourselves to this parturient who has a lot of things occurring in her. But before I go on to the pertinent changes in the pregnant patients, I would just like to briefly highlight what are the key changes the 2010 American Heart Association guidelines offers over the 2005 guidelines. As you all are aware, successful resuscitation requires a set of coordinated actions that are represented by the links in the chain of survival. And from the 2005 chain of survival, the 2010 chain of survival has incorporated a fifth link in the form of an integrated post-cardiac arrest care, which is so essential towards a long-term maternal survival. But the main emphasis of the entire change in the 2010 guideline has been an increased emphasis on the high-quality chest compressions that they are focusing on. And this has been brought about by simplifying the universal adult algorithm that is proposed by AHA, wherein they have tried to bring it in a circular form where they are focusing on simultaneous choreography approach to all the actions, which include chest compressions, airway management, rescue breathing, rhythm detection, and administration of shock. And if you look at the sequential algorithm that they have proposed, there are a few changes that actually highlight the focus towards a high quality CPR. And the first and foremost is that as soon as you approach an unresponsive victim, there has been an incorporation of assessment of breathing as well at that particular point of time, where we're looking at whether this particular patient is breathing or there is an abnormal breathing or not. The reason is that we have gone away with look, listen, and feel, because this was found to be inconsistent among providers. Providers would actually be wasting a lot of time doing all these measures, and therefore this initiation of chest compressions would really take a lot of time. And that is why the major shift that has come in from our sequence of actions of airway, breathing, and circulation have gone to CAP, a CAM. That is, we initiate our actions initially after checking responsiveness and calling for help with chest compressions, because they have been found to be the most important determinant in deciding the outcome of these patients. Not only that, to further focus on high quality CPR, there have been an emphasis on providing specific endpoints to compression rates and depths. So from approximately 100 per minute, the rate has gone on to at least 100 per minute. And if you look at the depth, they have specified a limit, because initially when there was a range from 1.5 to 2, providers would actually not push hard despite the guideline of pushing hard and fast. So this is just to emphasize more on these points, so we have a better outcome. Though the compression ventilation ratio remains the same, another feature that has gone out is the role of cricoid pressures while administering ventilations to these patients. And the reason behind that, there have been 7 non-randomized trials that have looked at it. And though they found that they do help in preventing aspiration, it also impedes the ventilation, and which is more difficult and cumbersome when you are going to resuscitate your pregnant patient. Now let us look. And the similar guidelines have gone on to simplify into the ACLS guidelines as well, where they have tried to simplify the entire algorithm by laying more emphasis on continuous high quality CPR. But there is another new area that have come up is monitoring your quality. So you also need to leave whether you're doing it really well or not. So how we do it, we'll come on to it later on. But what are the issues that, having said that, these were the general guidelines in any patient who has had a cardiac arrest. But what are the issues in a pregnant patient? The pregnant patient, as you all are aware, has unique physiological and anatomical changes occurring in her that make her a difficult patient to you in terms of resuscitation, because she is burdened by increased oxygen demand and a decreased FRCS, an aortocaval compression coming in with a gravid uterus, a lot of shunting of the cardiac output to the uterus, meaning that there's a lot of reduced venous return, so the cardiac output you're going to generate by high quality CPR is going to be really low, and of course there are issues with aspiration, difficult airway, and difficult intubation. So how do we actually incorporate all these changes into our algorithms? And AHA for the first time has come in with a beautiful algorithm which they have tried to adapt the maternal modifications and put in all these things into the algorithm so that we end up with a parturient with a very good survival and an outcome. And we go through these changes sequentially. Let us look at the changes and the modifications that you put to a parturient in a BLS situation. Is that as soon as the parturient has collapsed, there is, after you have a certain scene safety, you have to check responsiveness and also her breathing. But the point here to remember is when you're calling for help, here a bit of change comes in, that instead of not only calling your Code Blue team, there should be a provision in your hospitals to have a team that is actually activating the entire maternal obstetrician and other anesthetists, so that if there is a need for a perimortem cesarean section, things and equipment and personnel can be readied in a shorter period of time. While we continue in the same manner as I've highlighted, in the CAB fashion, the main changes for adaptations for a pregnant patient being putting her into a left lateral position in view, we want to take off the gravid uterus. Why we want to take off the gravid uterus, we have already highlighted, and we'll be talking about it again. And then we'll be adjusting our chest compressions optimally by placing them a bit higher up on the sternum than usual because of the shift of the gravid uterus shifting the diaphragm up. And then, of course, supplementing 100% oxygen by optimizing your ventilations. Now, compressions are always less effective in a parturient simply because I've talked about the supine position causing aortocaval compression, and this patient positioning is the most important strategy in improving CPR and quality of your chest compressions. If you look at this gravid uterus who is supine, this will not only compress the aorta and the inferior vena cava, it will decrease the cardiac output by around 30 to 50%, leading to a fall in blood pressure, which limits not only the effectiveness of chest compressions, but has adverse effects on maternal as well as fetal oxygenation. So when you're shifting this patient onto the lateral position, what you're achieving is a relief in compression, but also optimizing the quality of chest compressions. And when they looked at the data and the evidence, they found that the best relief of aortocaval compressions along with a good high quality of chest compressions comes with manual left uterine displacement. So place the patient in a supine position but displace the uterus either by a one-handed or a two-handed technique with, of course you need another provider to do that for, but then this actually helps because your quality of chest compressions do not get compromised here. However, if you do have a board and you can support it by a 30-degree tilt, and that's what studies look at, you get an optimal chest compression as well as relief of aortocaval compression at this particular angle, you can use them. But the point to remember is that if you're unable to get a return of spontaneous circulation, good effect, then you need to think about initiating perimortem section in these patients as early as possible. The other modifications that will be needed in a pregnant patient would be, apart from a high quality chest compressions, would be monitoring of the quality of CPR, and what monitoring that the AHA has suggested is monitoring of end-tidal carbon dioxide, the arterial pressures, and central venous oxygen saturation. Now, I have a rider here, is that this does not mean that in a pregnant patient or in any other patient who has arrested, while doing a CPR, you're going to put on these lines. If you have them in place and they're already there, you can use them to actually guide whether you are administering high quality compressions or ineffective. So if your ETCO2 curves is below 10, then you need to actually improve your chest compressions. Similarly, if the arterial blood pressure traces that the diastolic pressure is less than 20, you need to improve your physiological parameters so that you have an end tidal that's going above 10, an arterial pressure, diastolic pressure above 20, and a central venous oxygen saturation above 30. Now, having said that, during the course of your CPR, if you suddenly notice this trace coming in, showing an abrupt rise in EtCO2, this is an excellent indicator which will tell you that there is a return of spontaneous circulation. So this is how, if you have a monitoring in place and you have your parturient in a labor room who you suspect her to be a high-risk parturient and can go into any of these cardiac arrest scenarios, and you have these monitors, you can use them to your advantage to monitor your quality and get good outcomes. Apart from them, the few other modifications that we need are establishing an IV axis above the diaphragm because you have a gravid uterus sitting there. You can use the same doses for defibrillation. Monitors, fetal monitors do not hinder, but they can preferably be removed. Hypovolemia is a major reason why our patients are really going to go, because majority of our patients in an Indian scenario have a lot of obstetric bleeds up there. So, and they're not properly looked at and they're referred from outside. So there could be an underlying lurking up there. The rest of the things stay the same, except that in the PEA asystole algorithm, they have omitted atropine because that is not found to be effective at all. Now, going on from the C to A and then to B, the only changes in a pregnant patient have is that because there is an altered anatomy and the risk of aspiration are high, and then you have this patient in a left lateral position, you can find it difficult to actually secure a airway. So early insertion of an advanced airway is indicated. However, you need to use your bag mask ventilation optimally while you're preparing for this. And again, cricoid pressure is actually out of this whole sequence. There is, of course, a role of supraglottic airways because that's where we can, most of our providers and especially even obstetricians can be trained to put in these fast. And then, of course, you have to mandatorily confirm the placement using a capnography, because we have to remember that if there is some amount of circulation, that's going to generate a carbon dioxide, and that can actually not only help in confirming the right placement but also confirming whether you're doing the CPR well. Okay? And then at the same time, while you're doing all these measures, we need to also think about what would have caused the arrest, because in a pregnant patient there is a new mnemonic that they have very nicely given us. BO-CHOPS. These are the most commonest causes that any of your pregnant patient could have underlying, and they need to be addressed simultaneously, aggressively. So we need to be familiar to all of them. However, doing all these, if there is a time comes where your patient is not getting resuscitated, there is definite role of perimortem cesarean section. The guidelines for it remain the same. There has not been a massive change in these guidelines. In that sense that we actually are looking for a optimal time when we need to initiate a perimortem cesarean section. So if there is no return of spontaneous circulation within 4 minutes of initiation of your CPR, then you need to initiate section within 4 minutes with an aim to deliver the baby at 5 minutes of cardiac arrest. However, having said that, I haven't found a single report which says that they have been able to do it in such a short span of time. There have been also good outcomes even despite times as good as 8 to 10 minutes. And there's one case report saying a time of interval of 22 minutes, but of course that's too long for a hypoxic injury to set in and cause damage to both the mother as well as the neonate. The advantages that the cesarean section offers us in this scenario is that it not only empties the uterus, it relieves it improves your cardiac output and improves your hemodynamics, and also makes your neonate available for neonatal resuscitation, because even that fetus is getting compromised because of the compromise in blood flow and cardiac output. Having said that, all the parturients who attain return of spontaneous circulation are also candidates for post-resuscitation care. That would mean optimizing their ventilation and oxygenation, improving their maternal hemodynamics, but also a candidate for therapeutic hypothermia if you have facilities for one. The only point to remember here is that you should monitor fetal bradycardia if it is an antepartum patient. Thus, we need to optimize our outcomes in these patients, and we need to be careful to prevent if possible, because we can plan in key interventions, because 50% of maternal deaths are preventable. So, All you keep your laboring patients in left lateral position, administer oxygen if you're suspecting them to be critically ill in one of those categories, monitor them well, put an IV access always, treat hypotension aggressively and early, and then look out, keep a watch and keep a lookout for all these signs lurking beneath that can push this parturient into a cardiac arrest scenario. However, if it does occur, it's pertinent to diagnose it early. Call for help would mean calling for an obstetric team as well to initiate your perimortem section. Begin a high quality CPR, keeping in mind the entire skills of CPR, and take a prompt decision for an early section. For that, you need to be prepared always with all your equipment and your skills. The most important point that I want to highlight here is that we really need to upgrade our skills. And as a coordinator, one of the major attitudinal outcomes I've found is from anesthetists, because they feel that as anesthetists we know CPR and we need not learn them or relearn them or reinforce them. So I think this is one forum I would like to re-emphasize, that we need to keep not only updated but also update ourselves in our skills as well. Thank you so much for the patience.